Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Cancer Convos series. My name is Katie Campbell, and I am 32 years old and living with stage 4 breast cancer. And I've written a book called The Courage Club, where I talk about my own experiences on building a meaningful life in all the chaos that is cancer. And we just launched this Kickstarter last week to fund the book, so I'll leave information about that at the end of the video. But today I'm super excited to talk to my guest and my good friend, Jenn McRobbie. She is a fellow breast cancer survivor. She is author of a book, Why Is She Acting So Weird? And she's a speaker and life coach. So I'm going to let Jenn tell you about her experience with cancer and also the book that she wrote. So take it away, Jenn.
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much for having this conversation with me, Katie. I'm super excited. So, my sort of cancer journey began in 2013. I was one of those people that I was 38 and I noticed some changes in one of my breasts. And, I'd had two kids and I'd breastfed them both. And let's be honest, my 38-year-old breasts did not look the same as my 20-year-old ones. So I kind of chalked up some of the changes to just aging. And so I didn't rush to the doctor, but I had my annual OB appointment scheduled. And I went to go see him. And as soon as I opened my robe, before I could even say anything to him, he pointed at my breast and said, "Has it always looked like that?" Yeah. And my heart dropped because I kind of knew already at that point that something was wrong. So, needless to say, rushed through a mammogram, ultrasound, biopsy, all of that craziness to find out that I had breast cancer. Yay, not yay. And then afterwards I had a mastectomy, chemotherapy, radiation, and now me and tamoxifen are best friends for as long as my body can hold on to premenopausal status. So it's the weirdest thing because now so many people know about my body that didn't know about my body before.
Yeah.
Like, don't you find that to be the strangest part of this whole thing?
Talking about your boobs all the time in public is a very strange thing.
Exactly. And now because I wrote this book and because I do public speaking, my breasts and my body and my mental processes are like the focus for the world, which is a little strange. But I
It's
wrote
the price you have to pay, I think, to
it is. Well, and frankly, because education is so important to me, and I know it's important to you too, it's worth it. Like I'm willing to talk about it in order to educate people. But I wrote the book I started writing my book at the end or kind of middle end of radiation. And I always knew I was going to write a book, but I didn't think it would be this book. I thought it would be some fiction book or, some Twilight, Stephanie Myers, I'm going to be famous.
yeah.
But this book was calling to me, and I realized that the thing that was really the most impactful for me throughout this whole journey, I mean, the doctor's visits, the scare, the family, everything that we dealt with, what really impacted me the most was my friendships and my relationships. And I started hearing all of these stories. All of us have lost friends and our family members through this. And I started thinking, why? Why does that happen? And that's why the book ended up being titled, Why Is She Acting So Weird? Because we don't really know who she is, do we? She could be me. She also could be my friends. And so I wrote the book that I kind of wished had existed when I had been diagnosed, because I would have loved to be able to hand my friends this guide to say, this is why I'm strange to you, and I hope you can understand it, because I didn't have the words at the time. So since then, that's what I do. I talk about relationships and cancer and resilience and my boobs a lot.
I love it. So what about cancer has such an impact on relationships? And do you think that having cancer younger as a younger person, as not somebody in their, 60s or 70s, do you think that that has a different impact on relationships than getting cancer at an older age?
I I totally do. And here's why. At our age, when you're in your 20s and 30s, you're just establishing relationships.
Yeah.
You're establishing a work relationship. You're probably meeting someone that you might spend the rest of your life with. The friends that you had in high school are now sort of transitioning out of your life, and newer friends are transitioning in. So, really, young adults, our whole life is about relationships. And that's how we're building who we're going to be in the future when we're 50, 60, 70, 80. So when you have a major crisis, a major health crisis like cancer, it throws everything for a loop because it reminds everybody that we can die.
Yeah.
Right? And who in their 20s who hasn't faced something like this wants to think about that we're going to die? Like, it's just not, we're supposed to have that, that we'll believe we'll live forever.
Right.
Right? And because that's, young people, like, we believe we'll live forever. But
Invincible.
we're invincible, thank you, that's the word. We're invincible, but we're not. And cancer makes that abundantly clear. And so it both underscores it for the person who has cancer, but I really think it has a much bigger impact on the circle around the person who has cancer than anyone could really imagine. And your friends aren't really willing to admit, like, my husband always kind of jokes that while we were going through this whole thing, like, how could he say to me, Jenny, your cancer is like really getting in the way. Like, it's really bothering me. Right?
A huge burden. Yeah.
Like, you're a total burden right now. Like, it's making it hard. Like, you can't say that. Well, if you did, then there's something like really big. You could be really wrong with your relationship. So your friends and your family feel this burden that was not thrust upon them by you, by everybody else. And so they're struggling, but they can't tell you they're struggling.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Yeah, it is really hard. Yeah, it's and I have a whole chapter on relationships in the book that I wrote, and talk a lot about like that transition from like husband wife to caregiver patient. Like, that was such a difficult transition. Yeah.
I have a chapter in my book, a whole chapter in my book on that exact same thing, because I wanted to take care of Craig.
Yeah, exactly.
He wanted to take care of me. And we actually would like get in each other's way doing it. And it is definitely a huge transition. And everybody does it differently. And unfortunately, some relationships don't survive it.
Yeah, it's hard.
It is.
I totally understand. Yeah. So what, I guess, what's one piece of advice that you would give to, the cancer patient and how they're sort of managing relationships? Because I think, as cancer patients, we're like, I'm dealing with cancer. You guys have to deal with me and everything, which is totally fair. And like, we deserve that space, but like, like, we also have some responsibility, like, so how, as the cancer patient, do we deal with the ickiness that our friends are going through?
I think that when we're going through cancer, everybody, even ourselves, we give ourselves the permission to be sort of self-indulgent or maybe even a little narcissistic. And I don't mean that in the negative sense. I just mean that, everything really is about you at that time.
Yeah,
it should be. But really, the best thing that you can do if you value the relationships is literally to spend a microsecond realizing that it's happening to the person sitting across from you at the same time it's happening to you. And it doesn't mean that what they're doing is right or what they're saying is right or that you're all wrong. It just means that everybody is in this quicksand together. And so if you can expand your empathy, beyond yourself, I think that's probably the strongest way you can maintain a relationship, because from that space then you can speak truthfully, or you can say to somebody, every time you talk to me, you ask me, how are you feeling?
How are you feeling
Right?
with
Yeah.
this
And
face?
his face like, oh, how is it? You know, we all know that face, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But when we're speaking from a place of empathy, we can say to our friends, you know, when you do that, and I know you're worried about me, but when you do that, it enrages me. Right? Or whatever.
Yeah,
And then you can laugh about it and
yeah,
make a joke and get back to being friends.
yeah. Yeah, and you
So,
can say like, I think one of the things I ended up saying to people was like, just say like, "Oh, that shit sucks."
yes,
You know, because if you don't know what else to say, just say like, "Man, that sounds like it sucks." Like,
exactly.
you don't have to come up with like some big eloquent thing. You don't have to be profound. You don't have to like, you don't have to be afraid you're gonna hurt my feeling. Like, yeah,
Yeah, you got to find the way that you communicated with your friend before they had cancer,
yeah,
right? If you guys joked a lot, continue to joke. It's fine. Just because you have cancer doesn't mean you lost your sense of humor. In fact, I find my sense of humor is probably darker and a little weirder now that I've had
yeah, exactly.
cancer.
Yeah, you really got to hone that sense of humor when you
Yes,
have cancer.
exactly.
Yeah,
You gotta
totally.
work on
Yeah.
it.
So, what
So,
advice would you give to the friend of somebody who's going through
mm,
cancer?
so the
Why
friend,
is she acting so weird?
why is she acting so weird? That is the $1 million question, isn't it? I think for the friend, they have to realize that it is more important to tell someone you love them
Mm,
than it is to tell them anything else. And, it all goes back to how you would normally tell your friend you love them. A lot of people who I sort of, and this sounds bad, but I don't mean it this way, they're more peripheral friends. So
mhm,
I didn't consider them part of my close group. And when they found out that I had cancer, they tried to get into that close group
mhm,
because they were scared or they knew something or they had some information. And it ended up putting sort of a burden on me to try to establish a new
mm,
relationship
yep,
at a time when, like, I didn't even know who I was anymore.
yeah, yeah,
So, my best advice is, again, that microsecond, it doesn't take long. Evaluate the closeness of your relationship and just kind of stay the course.
yeah, mm, yeah,
And then after, and if you're always there, if you're always present, you send the occasional text or the email or call or, whatever it is, however you communicate, your friendship will likely survive this really horrible journey. And then you can work on being better friends
yeah, yeah,
because there will be gaps to fill because other people will have exited, stage
right,
right.
right, yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, no, that's so interesting. I mean, like, I do totally feel that people wanting, and I've done the same thing. I think like wanting to be close to somebody who is suffering in some way, like wanting to like you just want to like wrap your arms around them and you want to like help them and be there for them and everything. But like they also need their, if your relationship had space before, like you have to maintain that space. Otherwise, it's just like, who is this person who's all
Well,
of a sudden,
exactly. And,
yeah,
the thing that goes out the window, like the day you get that phone call is normalcy, right?
yeah,
And so anytime you can establish just even like a little bit of normalcy, it's really helpful. Like I have a friend, she and I are actually like extremely close, but we primarily communicate over text.
yeah,
We see each other occasionally, but we text, we'll text for hours in a
right,
day sometimes.
yeah, those people,
So when I was sick, she would just randomly text me pictures of like really bizarre hairdos. And 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 exactly, and I would chuckle and I'd send some back to her or I'd make some comment like, oh, I can't wait, but I'm going to do that in blue when I grow my
right,
hair again. But it removed the burden of me feeling like I needed to worry about her
hmm,
feelings, but I felt so super supported because I knew she was always there
totally,
in a regular way via text.
right.
So it's just an example of how you can kind of maintain the same type of relationship during a crisis like that.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's so important. That's so important. So, okay, so final question. What advice would you give to a newly diagnosed person? Just like, about relationships, but really about just like getting through the journey.
Find a friend that's been through it if you can. That's number
Mhm.
one. I
Mhm.
have to put a big shout out to Erin Price Shabert on
Yep.
this because
Mhm.
without her, I would have been lost. I was lucky enough to know her before I got diagnosed. And so the day I called her the very next morning after
Yep.
I got the news, and she was able to hold my hand. So if you can, if you don't know anybody personally, you can find support groups for your type of cancer and try to get in touch with other people that have been through it.
Young
Um,
adults.
young adults. Well, that's exactly for us. It's going to be
Yeah.
young adults because,
Yeah.
as a 60, I spoke to plenty of 60-year-old women that had breast cancer. It wasn't the same,
Mm-mm.
you
No.
know.
They're just dealing with different. They're like, how do I tell my grandkids I have cancer? And you're like,
Exactly.
how do I tell my boss I
How
have
do I tell my
cancer?
boss? Yeah, or how do I tell my husband,
Or
or
my kids? Or yeah.
or my children? Yeah, my children were 6 and 3
Yeah.
when I was diagnosed. It's a totally different thing than telling your, adult children.
Yeah.
So if you can, probably the best piece of advice I think is if you can find someone that's similarly situated to you. But
Hmm.
more than that, give yourself permission to be like whoever you are and feel whatever you feel. I think often we're encouraged to, be strong or positive or tough. And you know what? This does suck.
Yeah.
Like it really
It really
sucks.
does.
And if you don't acknowledge it along the way, it's
Hmm.
going to crop up later and it's going to be devastating. And so it's okay to cry. It's okay to be angry.
Yeah.
It's okay. And it's okay to laugh about it too. I know people think we're like super morbid when we, laugh about things, but it is a coping mechanism. So, find people like you and allow yourself to feel feelings.
Totally.
Totally.
Yeah, it's been an interesting process, I think, in writing this book because, I'm like writing about how I overcame all of these things and putting all these strategies down on paper and like how I dealt with all of this stuff. And I'm still like, having mental breakdowns and falling
Yes.
apart and feeling really afraid and feeling really angry and some days I'm like, am I a fraud? Like I haven't figured it all out, but no, that's the whole, I mean, that's like really the whole point is like it's a daily it's a daily journey and you just keep
Humanity, Katie. That's
yeah.
humanity.
Hmm.
And when we show each other our humanity and our vulnerability, that's when we can actually get close to each other.
Totally.
So you've got to show it. I'm so glad that you're writing this book. I'm like super excited to read it and share it with everybody
It's
because I think it's important.
yeah.
I think it's important that we show people, the realities of cancer, but also that it's not the end.
Yes. Yeah. It's just yeah. It's just life. It's all life.
That's right. It's just life.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you so much, Jen. It's been such a pleasure, and I am going to include a bunch of links to your life coaching business, and as well as your book, so people know where
Thank
to
you.
find it on Amazon. Yes, I highly recommend it. It's a great read.
Thank you so
Yeah, for anybody, if you have cancer or if you have a friend with cancer or whatever, everybody just share it back and forth. So yeah, thanks so much for hanging
much.
out.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to talk to you.
Take care, Jen.
Bye.
Bye.